This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Is your pet stressed out? Does your pet need annual vaccines? Which pet is best for a child? Would you know if your dog was in pain? Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor, where you'll learn everything about keeping your pet healthy and happy. From pet care, pet meds and grooming, to pet food, pet insurance, and dental care, this is the place to find out everything there is to know about pet wellness. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets, because it's your pet. Health matters. Please welcome your Pet Doctor host, veterinary media consultant and veterinarian, Dr. Bernadine Cruz.
The Lion King said it best. It's the circle of life, and it moves us all. We're all interconnected. What happens to a population of bats in Asia can affect the health of people in the Midwest. Medical research that focuses on keeping bees buzzing can ensure that you and I can continue to enjoy a handful of nutritious almonds along with our morning glass of orange juice. The death of deer in Maine can be the harbinger of a rise of tick-borne diseases for fluffy toy poodles in the suburbs of Tennessee and their owners. With the continuum of health between people, animals, and our planet, it would seem as though research dollars would be flowing to organizations and agencies who are investigating zoonotic diseases, those conditions that affect people and animals. You would think so. But sadly, the reality is dollars are few and far between. Ms. Cheryl Stroud holds a degree in veterinary medicine and a PhD in endocrine physiology. She is currently the executive director of One Health Commission. Her forte is bringing people together. We'll be right back after the short break.
Does your dog itch, scratch, stink, or shed like crazy? Come to Dynovite for help.
Order a 90-day supply of Dynovite.
Dynovite is nutrition.
Pick up 2 bottles of Lico-Chops. Get the 3rd bottle free.
New improved Lico-Chops with omega-3, omega-6, vitamin E.
And now, 6 extra direct-fed microbials.
Even better for the digestive tract and immune system.
Try Lico-Chops. Buy 2, get 1 free.
At Dynovite.com.
DINOVITE.com.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Dr. Stroud, I am so honored to have you as a guest today. Thank you very much for being my guest.
Hi, Bernadine. I'm very happy to. I'm just really enjoyed your opening comments there. Thank you.
Well, sadly, it is true, and you brought us together so we can learn about your organization, the One Health organization. Is this something new? Has it been around for a while?
Well, the term One Health is referring to a movement. It's a global movement to resurrect an ancient wisdom about the interconnectedness of our human health, our animal health, and our environmental health. So the idea, the ancient wisdom, the natural truth is just that. It's ancient. In fact, Socrates commented about the environment and health. But this call for us to work as professionals across our disciplines, to work together to solve many of our wicked problems like antimicrobial resistance and climate change, this call is new and urgent, not only for our health, but for the health of our planet.
I think because so many people are no longer living on the land, don't have that interconnection to what's happening around them. I know it was several years ago, I was at one of our county fairs, and a young mother was there. It was in the animal barns, of course. Where else you're going to find a veterinarian? One of the animal barns, and a woman came in with a young child in a stroller, and they're looking at this little kid, goat, and the child saying, "Mom, what's that?" And she said, "It's a baby pony." It's like, oh,
you're kidding me.
And people are, they're looking at cows being milked, and they were just aghast. It's like, well, milk comes from the store. What do you mean it comes out of this cow? And it's sad, and it's a reality that just too many people have no idea where their food comes from, how the health of an animal really makes a major difference for us, but it does. So that is kind of your lead-in. Why is this One Health Commission something that is so integral at this point in time right now in our society?
Well, it's not that the One Health Commission, the organization that I work for, is necessary, although I would give you a long argument as to what we're doing is really important. But this concept for One Health is absolutely urgent. As we have moved into our specialties, learning more and more about this amino acid and this strand of DNA and what it does, we have become multiple systems of specialists that really have kind of forgotten and lost our memory that we need to also connect with the bigger picture and remember to work together. It's a real kind of cruel truth that no one profession can have all the answers. So we're just going to have to really work together to address some of these really, really wicked problems.
It was several years ago, I had the opportunity to meet this spectacular MD, Barbara Horwath. She's at UCLA, actually had her on the show, cardiologist. And she wrote a book. She coined a term called zoobiquity. And she wrote a book, same name, Zoobiquity, strongly recommend it. And it was fascinating because you and I as veterinarians, I know that we will oftentimes will look into research of what our MD colleagues are doing and going, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm seeing that in, my dog or cat. Maybe these are treatment modalities we can use for them, something that we can try. But it is so rare that the MDs you're talking about kind of being in these silos and being specialists. It's so rare that MDs will look into what veterinary medicine is doing because, oh, you're just little animal doctors. What do you know? So yes, we really do need to talk and learn to each other. Are there some specific areas that it's the most critical?
Oh my gosh, it would be really hard for me to give. Zoonotic diseases, and for your audience who might not be familiar with that term, a zoonotic disease is a disease that can pass between humans and animals. And 75% of our diseases are zoonotic. So it was zoonotic diseases and the threat of things like Ebola, which we think came out of bats, and HIV/AIDS, which we now know was a zoonotic disease when it emerged into our awareness back in the 80s. We think that came out of chimpanzees from bushmeat consumption. So zoonotic diseases is a major area, but there's so many areas that, in fact, when I'm talking about One Health, I have people say, well, One Health is about everything, therefore it's about nothing. And the fact is there are just so many arenas that we need to be paying attention and working together across our specialties. Now, don't get me wrong. We have learned an incredible, wonderful amount of information from the specializations. We need them. We don't need to dilute them, but we do need to create mechanisms and opportunities that we can work together. So some of the arenas where One Health is important is paying attention to animals being sentinels for things that we're being exposed to in our environment, just like you were mentioning earlier. Antimicrobial resistance, climate change, comparative biology, translational research, which Barbara Nettison-Horowitz talks about, and she runs these wonderful Zoobiquity conferences. She calls her book Zoobiquity her love letter to veterinarians, and she's trying very hard to help her colleagues in the human medical world understand the things that we share in common between human medicine and animal medicine, so that we can open the doors for learning from each other, all the way from the cardiac problems that she was first brought to awareness about veterinary medicine from, to psychological problems that are dealt with in the animal world and the human world. So even things that are maybe a little out of the box for some of your audience thinking, but plant and soil health, we're going to have to work together to keep healthy soils, to keep plant and crop production sufficient that we can feed the projected 9 billion people that they think will be on the earth before 2050. I think the projection is now. So, that's one of our major challenges, is to figure out how we're going to feed our burgeoning population without, further destroying our earth and putting us in greater jeopardy by making us come in closer contact with some of the wild animals. And the animals are not the bad ones here. It's what we're doing to the environment as humans and what we're doing to impact our planet's health that are the culprits here. So we really have to work together on all these major, major issues.
When you look at sometimes MDs and researchers not realizing this interconnectedness, it was really brought home to me. I'm on this group that is asked sometimes to be part of research studies. And the University of California at Irvine has this very robust research going on right now for Alzheimer's. So they called me, and because I am getting mature, to see if I wanted to be part of this proactive, predictive Alzheimer testing. It's like, okay, and they're going to monitor. And at the end, from talking to this PhD researcher, I said, well, you're probably aware that since I'm a veterinarian, dogs and cats also get basically Alzheimer's. We can't call it that. We call it dementia, cognitive dysfunction. And have you looked into what they're doing there? Because here you have this really compact life cycle, and you can see if a medication is going to make a difference. You can see the changes that are going on. And she was dumbfounded. She had no idea that there was this area that could really help her and help people like me and, some of the listeners as we mature and rerun into these issues. But I think the listeners hopefully realize, wow, this is just so important. And talking about the soil, it's like, oh, yeah, that does make a difference too. It's not just, animals and insects. It's all of us connected.
Absolutely. Your story is just an emphasis on our need for sharing information across our worlds, especially for pet owners to be aware of this.
Why is it so hard, do you think, for academia and research and industry, all these, to get funding? You talk to people and it seems like the light bulb should immediately go off if they're not aware of it. So why hasn't that, blast of financing gone into these areas? It's so critical.
Well, it is critical, and that's just a real critical question. It always comes down to money, right? It's always funding. And so our systems that have created the silos that we're in, the professional silos, have also created competition for funding. And this happens all the way to our federal agencies, agencies like USDA and EPA and CDC, which, they get their pot of money and then they go and do their work. But sometimes the work that they're doing could be done together much more efficiently and economically rather than being done separately. So the challenge is to help our policymakers and our funding decision makers as to what's going to be funded, to help them really get this this overall concept of how important it is for us to do things together. And our systems, things like our academic tenure systems, don't even necessarily reinforce people working across professions. When it comes to academic tenure for a faculty person, if they haven't published in the most elite journal for their field, which means that they've had to focus just on their arena, then they don't get as many brownie points for tenure. Which means if they've worked across disciplines, they often are not publishing in a specialty journal. They're publishing in a journal that appreciates a broader look. So there are a lot of challenges for making this happen. And what I find is when you tell people about this and they go, oh my gosh, you can almost see the light bulb going on in their head. They'll say, oh my gosh, we're not already doing that? And, the sad truth is, no, we're not. We have 2 One Health congressional bills have been introduced into Congress. And as I travel to D.C. fairly often, I'm actually based in North Carolina, and as I travel to D.C. fairly often, I'm finding more and more recognition of the term and the concept when I'm walking around D.C., but we still have a long way to go to help everybody really understand this.
I think so many people are protective of their little silo, their research. They don't want to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, because, somebody else may take this idea and run with it. And then for all this time that I've spent and just trying to get tenure, it's gone, or my research dollars are going to be taken away from me. They're going to go to somebody else. So I think trying to, as you say, work collaboratively, bring people together is so important. And zoonotic diseases, you mentioned previously, things like Ebola coming out of bats and having bushmeat where it got into people. There is the book, I've mentioned it before, called The Hot Zone, that is just absolutely terrifying. It would make a great movie, which they did base one off of. But it's true, talking about how Ebola came to be seen.
Well, there's another really good book by David Quayman called Spillover that I don't know if you've read it yet, but it's quite an eye-opener for This science journalist actually went and embedded himself with the researchers. So books like that are helping raise awareness. But I also find that zoonotic diseases, as important as they are, they're not the whole One Health story. So I try to remind people when I'm telling them about One Health that One Health, in my mind, is kind of like a diamond. When you cut a diamond and you create all these different faces, and you look at like each face of the diamond, you'll get a different reflection and a different kind of view into the complexity and the lights and the shimmers of that diamond. It's kind of like that for One Health. There are many faces of this diamond that is One Health, and they're basically all the arenas that are just begging for our attention and for us to work together across disciplines.
I love that analogy of the diamond. That is really very good. Well, speaking of being very good, we're going to need to take a good little break here right now so we can talk to our commercial sponsors. We're going to be right back after this short break. I'm speaking right now to Dr. Cheryl Stroud. She is the Executive Director for the One Health Commission. We'll be right back after this short break.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Molly, here's your dinner. Zeus, that's not your food.
Don't let that happen to your precious cat. Elevate your cat's eating experience with the Cat Tree Tray. The Cat Tree Tray keeps your cat's food off the floor and conveniently located on the cat tree. It's the perfect way to eat. It's a beautiful wrought iron tray that easily attaches to your cat tree and keeps dogs and other critters out of your cat's dish. A must for multi-pet households. There's a 6-inch tray for large bowls and a 4-inch tray for smaller bowls. Purchase your Cat Tree Tray today. Go right now to cattreetray.com. That's cattreetray.com. CATTREETRAY.com.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to the Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Dr. Stroud, this is, hopefully my listeners are saying, yes, we need to have funding. Hopefully talk to their legislators, especially on the national level, saying you need to pass these bills. It's critical for my health, for my children's health, for the planet's health. I think more and more people are hopefully becoming aware of it. But I think knowing what's happening in their own lives is important, and talking about how this One Health affects their pets. Could you give us some examples of how One Health affects their dog or cat or bird that they have?
Well, it's not just that it affects their pets, it's how it affects them and their pets, because, we're so connected. So I'll give you a few examples. I don't know if many of your listeners are aware of this, because I'm still so amazed that a lot of people don't realize that bats can carry rabies. Now, in many countries, rabies is a huge problem, but it's canine rabies. It's from dogs. But in our country, it's mostly wildlife. And when we do have the occasional death to rabies in the United States, it usually came from a bat, and it usually came from people not being aware if they had a bat exposure to be concerned. So this is where your pet comes in. Keeping your pet vaccinated for rabies is kind of your first line of defense for your family for being exposed to rabies, and having the knowledge that bats are incredibly valuable to our ecosystems. They eat tons of insects and mosquitoes that also can carry disease. So we don't want to hurt bats, but we do want to be aware that they can carry rabies. So that's right there at the intersection of human health and animal health and environmental health. Another example is a vector-borne disease known as Bartonella. So some of your viewers, your listeners, might be familiar with Bartonella because they might have heard that it's what causes cat scratch fever. And some others who might be history buffs may realize that it's the organism that was recognized as causing trench fever in World War I. Well, it turns out it's
I
very...
didn't know that. Thank you.
So it's very, very commonly found in cats, but it's not the cat's fault. It's being vectored by fleas and a lot of other insects. They've actually found this organism in many, many species, and it can be vectored. Vectored meaning it can be carried and transmitted from an animal to a human and back and forth. by not only fleas, but ticks and biting lice. That trench fever, they think, was probably from lice, from the people being in the trenches in filthy conditions. So Bartonella has now recently emerged as a much more significant pathogen in human beings than we ever thought. Most physicians these days are taught that Bartonella is self-limiting. It's no big deal. It'll go away, and you might cause some swollen lymph nodes, and they might call it cat scratch fever. But we have learned over the past few years that it can actually behave a whole lot like the organism that causes Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi. It can actually climb inside our cells and hide from our immune systems, and can then cause all sorts of problems ranging from degenerative arthritis to neurologic degenerative syndromes to digestive issues and granulomatous lesions that can look like cancers. And some of this information has been emerging over the past 10 or 15 years out of the veterinary sector as they realized that this organism was actually invading people. And they've actually been working, Dr. Ed Brightsword here at North Carolina State University has been working for years to bring this awareness to the human medical field, saying, so many people have cats, and some of these cats have fleas, and it's not that the cat necessarily gives the Bartonella to the people, but if there are fleas in the environment and people get scratched or even bitten by their cat and this flea dirt gets into that scratch, they can get Bartonella. Now, not every cat carries it, but it happens often enough that I'm suspecting that there are thousands of people walking around infected with this organism, and they're even having joint replacements where they have this organism and nobody knows it. They just think they've got degenerative arthritis. So there's another major example of things that are being shared, and we're having so much difficulty getting the information across the sectors just because of our silos. I've got other examples. Do you want me to keep going, or shall I stop?
No, I want you to keep going because I think this is important. And right now, I know, being in Southern California, people will come in with their pets, and one of the very common questions I ask is what type of preventive do they have their pets on? So if it's an indoor cat, it's usually nothing, and they don't want to vaccinate it for rabies, and I'm not seeing fleas, and I don't want to do anything. I said, well, we've had the situation here in Laguna Beach, so this wonderful, nice, clean community, whereas about 2 years ago, here's this little kitty minding its own business indoors, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this bird flew in, and it's not even flying all that well, and I can get it and play with it. Well, the bird happened to be a bat, and the bat happened to have rabies, and the cat wasn't vaccinated. So I will use that example to say all cats, all dogs need to be vaccinated for rabies because their bite, I get paper cuts that are bigger than a bat bite. And if you're a kitty or a dog, with all that fur, you're not going to know. And then with regard to fleas are basically year-round parasites. I tell people the atomic bomb will come and go. We're going to be left with fleas, cockroaches, rats, and politicians. So keeping those fleas under control, because when you see a flea finally on the pet, that's the tip of the iceberg. They're in the environment. And the cocoon stage, that's the one that's basically impervious. So keeping up on good hygiene, good preventives, that is going to make your pet healthier and you healthier. Okay, so Dr. Stroud, what are some other examples why people need to be so careful of these one health approach of our pets affecting our health and vice versa?
Well, I'll mention just briefly one that some of your listeners may already be aware of, salmonella in pet turtles and in pet chickens, because so many people have chickens in their backyards now. So they just need to be aware about cleanliness and hand washing. And then there was the monkeypox situation some years back where pocket pets were brought into the country, perhaps illegally, because there is a black market for pocket pets and a lot of exotics. And these
what's a pocket pet? People may not be familiar with that.
Pocket pets are hamsters and mice and gerbils and little furry creatures, and a lot of them
in your pocket.
Yeah, and a lot of them are imported, and some not necessarily always legally so. So there's not any regulation in place that's making sure that they're coming in healthy. Well, on the monkeypox story, I think they were rats. I can't remember if they were giant rats, but they were
giant rats, yes.
Gibbon
rats or something like that, some strange name.
they came into the country and went to pet stores and people bought them. And then people started noticing these little pox-like lesions on their hands. And, CDC had to get involved to figure out, okay, where's this coming from? And stop the sale and educate the people about it. So, it's just, again, an example of how closely connected we are and how things can sometimes be way beyond our control or outside our scope even of awareness. Another example, our pets can be sentinels of the environment that we're sharing with them. We live in the same environment with our cats and dogs. Sometimes they sleep in our beds. Our cats and dogs may go outside and go into areas where there are ticks and fleas and then come in and get in the beds with us and actually, bring those ticks and fleas into us with all the diseases that can be brought in, can come to us through ticks and fleas, things like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Ehrlichia and Babesia and all these vector-borne diseases, which most of us don't want anything to do with. And sometimes if we go to our doctor, our doctors may not be very up on asking us the right questions to get to the diagnosis. I mean, my own husband and I had a situation where in his travels, he picked up Sarcoptes, and we both struggled with Sarcoptes, which is, it's a mange mite. Your listeners will know it as a mange mite that their dogs might get. And our dermatologist was not familiar with the presentation, and it literally took us weeks. Finally, I got frustrated because I said, I'm a veterinarian. I deal with this all the time in animals. Please, 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 will you treat us for Sarcoptes? And finally, we were able to get the diagnosis and get a treatment underway. But many people would not have had that knowledge base. Another example is, I don't know if you guys followed the story of the polybrominated diphenyl ethers, PBDEs, and perfluoroalkyl substances. They are flame retardants. And this is a really eye-opening story to me because I kind of lived it. I came out of veterinary school in 1981. I was not taught anything about hyperthyroid cats that had overactive thyroids. But in the 80s, the mid to late 80s, we later realized the association. These flame retardants were introduced into our environment. Sofas and upholsteries and hard plastics like computer surfaces and television surfaces. And these PBDEs would outgas into the dust particles, and our cats love to sit around on those surfaces, right? And they get these dust particles on them, and they groom themselves. That's what cats do, right? And so they would get high levels of these PBDEs, and it turns out they're major endocrine disruptors. We were putting these things in children's pajamas. And so when some people at EPA realized the association here and did some research, they found that it was a very high correlation from when those things came into our environment and when we started as veterinarians recognizing hyperthyroid cats. And very interestingly, a researcher at Duke University looked for these PBDEs in the blood of infants and small children, and she found them. And
scary.
It's even been postulated now, because they're such profound endocrine disruptors, which mean they can mess our hormones up, right? It's our thyroid hormones and all sorts of hormones. It's been postulated that that could be an underlying environmental contributor to our obesity epidemic, especially in children.
Fascinating.
So it's just fascinating, all the interconnections and our lack of a forum, a mechanism, a way for us to share this knowledge and to bring it to the forefront across professions. And that's what this whole One Health conversation is all about. I could go on for hours, Bernadine.
One of the things I find, again, so frustrating, you'd mentioned CDC, that sadly and you think CDC is the protector of our health, and that is the final word. Think of a medical issue, Ebola coming into the United States. CDC is, right there on the forefront, protecting us. And it was back, I believe, in 96 in New York, where they had all these people coming down with what they thought was the flu, all these crows that were dying. And then hopefully Dr. McNamara, veterinarian pathologist at the Bronx Zoo, saw that several of the animals in her exhibits, birds, were dying, and looked and thought that it was a disease she had never seen in the United States, but it was West Nile, and brought this to the attention of CDC. And CDC basically said, "Oh, you're really sweet, honey. You're a veterinarian. You don't know anything about human health. Please go away." The long and short, She brought it to the Army's attention because of connections that she knew. They brought it to CDC, and it was West Nile. So, yes, we do need to talk and listen to each other.
It was the first time that it had been seen in the Americas. And so the critical thing was that Tracy knew, Dr. McNamara knew that if the CDC, the human docs, thought that this was Eastern encephalitis, and they said, we got this. This is what this is. And she knew that if it were Eastern encephalitis, that the flamingos in the zoo should be dying, and they weren't. So this has got to be something else, and that is a fabulous example of kind of the brick walls we can run into sometimes when we try to share information, and things have gotten better, but I promise you, we still have a long way to go.
So what can my listeners do? We have a few minutes left. What can my listeners do to help promote awareness? What can they do to protect themselves?
Well, educate yourself. So the One Health Commission is the organization that I work for. It's just one of a number of organizations. In fact, we partnered with the One Health Platform and the One Health Initiative groups to create a global One Health Day. And please search it and go and look at it, because you can actually see where this is this concept is being embraced all around the world by the pins on the map around the world where people are doing One Health Day events. So the One Health Commission, we work to educate people, and we do webinars. One thing that your pet owner audience might be interested in is right now the Commission is partnered with EPA and doing a national pet health survey. So if you go on onehealthcommission.org webpage, you will find that survey, and please go and participate, because it's a survey that's focused on exactly what we were talking about, pets being sentinels for things that we as humans might be exposed to in our environment. So it's a survey of pet owners for things that their pets have been diagnosed with, just so that EPA could see if there are any quote-unquote hotspots around the country that they might plot on their, they've got this great program called Enviro Atlas, where they might see if there are things, especially cancers and things like that, that humans might be exposed to just like the animals in the environment. So there's one thing that you might do along with education. If you find this issue with making sure that children and parents especially know that bats can carry rabies, because if you find a bat on the ground, it's so cute and cuddly, children want to pick it up, and you really, really, really have to educate people to protect our bats, but don't touch one. So we have a bat rabies education team that if you go on the One Health Commission's website and look under programs, find the bat rabies education, you'll find some posters there. Print those out, put them in your schools, in your local businesses, in your post offices if they'll give you permission, to try to help educate the public about bats carrying rabies. Take care of our bats, we need them, but don't touch one. Maybe if any of your listeners really get, taken with this whole concept, I'd be very happy to talk with them about how to go about setting up a local reading group or a discussion group. Be sure to talk to your doctors and your dentist about this One Health concept. Tell them what it is. Make them aware so they'll go and look and read about it. Oh, and here's a really exciting one. If you're in Washington, D.C., go to the Outbreak exhibit that the Smithsonian has created. It's housed in the Museum of Natural History. It's an incredible educational process for zoonotic diseases, starting with avian influenza, which, by the way, was one of the diseases that really brought this whole One Health conversation, kind of brought it full tilt, because we are so concerned that there'll be another huge influenza epidemic as bad as the 1918 one, which, by the way, killed my great-grandfather. So there's so many things. This Outbreak exhibit, if you can't get to DC, I can put you in contact with people at Smithsonian who can help you bring this exhibit to your area, to your local library or your business. So that would be pretty exciting if people want to help spread the word, at least on the zoonotic disease front. So I urge your listeners to just educate themselves about this whole concept and the many arenas that it embraces, because there's always something that each of us can do to help further this discussion.
Dr. Stroud, yes, we could go on for hours. You said you have so much information. It's really enlightening. It's also somewhat terrifying that we need to be aware, we need to be proactive, and we need to chat with each other. So as the executive director of the One Health Commission, yes, I can see your forte is bringing people together. Thank you again for being a guest today.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz. I've enjoyed it.
So this is Dr. Bernadine Cruz. You're listening to The Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio. If you have questions about zoonotic diseases Bring it to your veterinarian's attention, bring it to your MD's attention. If you have questions that you would like us to address on the show, please drop me a line. So please turn in again next week. We'll give you more information on how to make you the best possible pet owner. Have a great week.
Pets can be a wonderful addition to your life because they're a member of the family. Keeping them healthy and happy is important. Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor with veterinary media consultant and veterinarian Dr. Bernadine Cruz. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets. The Pet Doctor, on demand every week, only on PetLifeRadio.com.